All right. I will now call the April 9th, 2024 City Council meeting to order at 6:05. Councilor Lehman, will you lead the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you.
Okay, well, welcome. Thank you all for coming tonight. First of all, you notice that there's fewer of us than usual, so we really appreciate you being here. I would like to welcome tonight's special guest, State Representative Charlie Conrad. We're very happy that you're here, and as I said, we're happy that you listen to us, that you champion our causes, and we'd like to have you join us for tonight's meeting, and we'll hear from him in just a few minutes. Other mayor's comments, the council appointment review, we have a staff report from Adam Hanks and also Sammy Egbert if needed.
Adam and Mayor, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick roll call for the record.
Oh, thank you so much.
Sure. We have Councilor Engelbretson, Mayor Bell, Councilor Lehman, Alan Wells here, and we are missing Councilor Fox and Councilor Smith, and we do have a quorum.
Again, we're a little shy. We're going for quality, not quantity tonight, apparently.
Before we hop into the council appointment review, just as since we talked quorum, the way that the charter, we clearly went over this, Sammy and I, just to make sure that we're all squared away for the meeting with a vacancy. This is it's kind of an odd timing, but I'll hit these both. They're kind of concurrent issues, but Brandon, maybe I'll just start there and then we'll finish with the quorum and what that means to the rest of tonight's meeting. But unfortunately, Councilor Rhodes, who you all appointed to council at last month's meeting, and then he attended and participated in that meeting. After we went through our full formal orientation that was subsequent to the meeting, found out that he has a very unique situation with his property where the property line splits it, and the house is on the back portion, which is outside the city limits. And we scoured through, Sammy and I talked with two different two different attorneys, kind of just making sure and vetting it all the way to see if there was a legal way or something we could justify to keep Brandon in that appointed slot. The voting precinct was one of the key pieces that kind of negated our ability to do that. The voting precinct for the portion, the tax account, he has two tax accounts and one parcel. So he does pay some city taxes. We thought that was our hook and our link to keep him in. But the other tax account, it shows clearly a voting precinct outside the city. So that is inconsistent with the charter and with state law. He resided in that house over 12 months. Unfortunately, that house, the property splits in and out, but the house is out. And that's really a determining factor for being eligible to be a city councilor. So Brandon, as you can imagine, was bummed to hear that news too, but he totally understood it. And in your packet is a resignation letter, kind of explaining that. But there still is a formal process for council. I mean, he can resign, but it was recommended by legal counsel that our council make a motion to rescind the appointment, since it was really there's really nothing for him to resign from technically, because we have to just rescind that. But I thought Brandon did a nice job of kind of explaining that from his perspective. So that's the scoop, and that creates then a different set of quorum math because it's a vacancy, not an absence. So we're back to having 5 councilors and the mayor. So we have 2 vacant, so we still have a majority of the available counselors. So we'll hit that topic and then I'll explain maybe how that quorum is a little bit different for when we're dealing with ordinances, which we do have on the agenda tonight. But first things first is a motion to unfortunately rescind the appointment of Brandon Rhodes.
And before I do that, and that will be the next on the agenda, at each of your places, you have a couple of little items, actually 3, if you include the pen. Remember, April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. And so these are just reminders for all of us or to pass on to friends and neighbors should you choose to do that. Thank you for that. Remember, we made that resolution, I believe, at last council meeting.
And Mayor, can maybe add in, we do have several social media posts throughout the month that also are part of that campaign.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, which is an extremely important campaign. Being an old pediatric nurse, I can attest to that. Councilor Lehman.
I make a motion to rescind the appointment of Brandon Rhodes to the position of city councillor.
Okay, so that's a motion by Councilor Lehman and a second by Councilor Wells. Any discussion? Everybody's clear on that, then I will ask for a show of hands to accept. We have 3 A's. And so the motion passes 3-0. Sammy, are there any proposed changes to tonight's agenda?
Yes, we do. We have 3 things in your red folder. The first one is your city administration report, which goes with the agenda item number 11, and we'll just go into the back of the packets. It's noted up on the top left-hand corner. We also have a report from the Finance Audit Committee. This will go under the liaison, the new spot on the agenda under liaison updates. Information. And thirdly, we have an agenda item it'll be agenda item 9.5 added. It was for a new OLCC license application. And
We don't have that in the.
you don't, that will be coming
soon. Okay.
This one is a literal last minute on the part of the applicant. And so that's at council discretion, whether you want to review that and make it is a recommendation rather than a formal council decision. So we can talk about that when we get to that spot.
It was truly a
Yeah.
last minute. So thank you for bringing that forward and explaining that. Is there anyone signed up to provide public comment tonight?
We did not receive any comment and there is no one signed up, Mayor.
Thank you very much. So our consent agenda consists of the minutes from February 10th, which was our city council retreat, and our minutes from March 5th, which was the city council work session. Are there any council members who wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on. I will entertain a motion at this time to approve the consent agenda.
Mayor, I just had one minor suggestion on the March 5th minutes and just more of a clarification, but on the last page, the 4th paragraph, so that would be page 3 of the March 5th minutes. In the 3rd sentence of that paragraph, it talks about a rare intern. And it's in all lowercase, the word rare is, but I believe that is a acronym and it might help. It might help to capitalize that in case anybody ever reads that in the future to clarify what type of intern that is.
We will make that change as a Scribner's error. Thank you very
You bet.
much for pointing that out. Is there anything else that anyone has noticed and wants correction on? changes to? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda, the minutes February 10th and minutes March 5th.
There a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Counselor Lehman and a second by Counselor Engelbrechtsen. All those in favor?
Aye.
3. And any opposed? So the motion passes 3-0. And now, Representative Conrad, if you would like to address council, we would love to hear from you.
Mayor, councilors, thank you so very much for making space on the agenda for me tonight. I appreciate you doing that. I'm happy to be here and excited that we get to talk about what we did in short session. So I've got some notes and talking about the legislative summary. And I did this after the long session as well. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it here. So this is the first time I've been able to present to you guys. So I appreciate that opportunity. And so as I go through the summary, please feel free to stop me at any point in time, ask questions. I try to keep it at somewhat of a high level. There are some very complex topics, as you can imagine, that I've outlined in here. Happy to get as much detail as you want to, but if you don't want to, I can keep moving on. So feel free to stop. Whatever works for you. I'm here to help provide information for you and for folks that are listening as well. And once again, my name is Charlie Conrad. I'm the state representative for House District 12, which includes Coburg. And the district boundaries are from the Lane Douglas line. So it includes Crestwell Cottage Grove, all the way up just barely into Lynn County. So Junction City, but not Harrisburg, and all the way to the peaks of the Cascades. So Oak Ridge and up the McKenzie Valley as well. And this is my first term, so I'm a freshman legislator, and the committees that I am on, usually we're assigned to 3 committees. Subsequently, I was put on a 4th committee. I'm on the Judiciary Committee. I was a police officer for 14 years, so bring a little bit of experience to that. I'm also on the Behavioral Health and Healthcare Committee. I'm on the Emergency Management, Vets, and General Government Committee. And then I'm also on the Public Safety, Ways and Means Subcommittee. And that subcommittee looks at the financial side for all things on the Judiciary Committee and also in the emergency management sector. So again, for this district, emergency management is one of the critical things that we work through every winter, as we found out in January, and then again every summer as we're preparing to do now. So happy to be on that. And just as a point of reference, some of the other things that I'm involved in, that I participate in, and feel free to reach out to me at any point in time for any of these topics. Happy to talk to you about them. But I've also been appointed to the Pacific Northwest Economic Region. PNWER is the acronym. And this is an international organization. We represent Northwestern United States and Western Canada. And we look at the economic region as a whole. So a lot of minerals, a lot of emergency management, a lot of those transportation type topics, railroads between Canada and the United States, and look on that economic development and look at it at a larger region. Also on the Justice Reinvestment Grant Committee. And this grant committee is through this Criminal Justice Commission. And we look at helping grants that come in from parole and probation at the county level and ways to reduce recidivism and the number of days in prison. So I'm also on the Juvenile Justice Policy Commission, which was set up after the 2023 long session. And we should hopefully be getting going here in May with our first meeting with that. Also on the Juvenile Interstate Compact. So looking at how juveniles that are in custody get transferred from state to state. I'm also on a Modernizing Grants and Contracts Task Force. This came out of the long session for Senate Bill 606. And the one thing that I was able to do this last session, also got asked to be on the Measure 110 Budget Work Group. So if you remember, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, with Measure 110, the fix, we had the policy side of it, which turned into House Bill 4002, the recriminalization side. But we also had that corresponding budget bill that looked at funding shovel-ready projects for behavioral health to help start building that capacity, because we have underinvested for decades in Oregon. First step to try and figure out, okay, what can we do to start building capacity? So I was happy to be on that committee as well. And then in addition to those, I also participate in the Water Caucus, and that's exactly what it is. We focus, and this is a bicameral, bipartisan caucus. We focus on water issues. We focus on not only water issues for cities and infrastructure, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well, but also for the rural and the agricultural sector, particularly in the frontier counties when they've got a whole host of other issues than what we have over here. And then I also participate in the Veterans Caucus. And we were fortunate enough that through our advocacy, we got funding for the Veterans House housing down in Roseburg. We're looking at redoing that house to get some veterans some homes. And it's a state federal partnership. It's been going on for 15 years. So we finally got 35 million from the state side. And now we're working with the federal delegation to make sure that we can get the federal monies as well. And then we can actually go forward with that project and start housing some of the veterans down in that area that needs it. So some of those advocacy, some of those projects, very happy to be part of it, very happy to be making progress and doing some good things out there for the community and people that need it. Just as a reference, and my apologies, I don't know how much the counselor know about the legislature and what we do and how we do it. But in the long session, we have unlimited number of bills that we can submit. And some legislatures literally, submit over 100 bills, 100 ideas of changing legislation. For the short session, we were limited to 2. And then each of our policy committees could have 3 committee bills to go forward as well. And so with 60 of us in the House and with 30 senators, in the House side, we submitted 180 measures total. I say measures because it wasn't always legislation changes. Sometimes we have more resolutions, joint resolutions, other different types of things that we pass in the House. So of those 180, 71 passed both houses, means the House and the Senate. And then on the Senate side, they submitted 111 measures and 62 of them passed both houses. I promise I will not be talking about all of those. I will skip to some of the interesting ones. And just as a comparison, in the long session on the House side, we submitted 1,758 measures and 360 passed both houses. And then on the Senate side, they submitted 1,212 in the long session and 293 passed both houses. So you can see a substantially lower workload, but in a 35-day compressed time. Yes, Counselor.
My question, how long was the session?
35 days.
And the long session is?
It goes long session 180. It went from mid-January to mid-June. And it varies a little bit. We got out a little bit before 35 days. This session, we cut it a couple days short. So there are some bills that died over on the Senate side that didn't go through because of that. Few of my high-level comments. This was a very bipartisan session. If you compare it to even the long session, which is my first session, we had a lot of controversy in the long session. In this short session, we didn't. It was very bipartisan. That's my perception of it, but it's also perception of many of the legislators, the veteran legislators that have been there, of the lobbyists and other people and organizations that engage with the legislature. People walked away going, wow, that was a good session. We got some things done. Clearly, there are some partisan line issues. Clearly, we didn't always disagree. I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But overall, with the work that we were able to accomplish and some of the key signature bills that came out of such a short session, it really was a lot of work together by everybody in there. And it's, on the House side, but it's also on the Senate side. One of the key things that we did, one of the last acts, is Speaker Rayfield out of Corvallis stepped down because he's running for Attorney General. And so we voted in now Speaker Julie Fahey. And I'm excited about that because she is part of our regional delegation. And as a regional delegation, we talk a lot, we work together quite a bit. And the fact that she is now Speaker of the House, she knows Lane County, she knows rural communities, and she's advocated. She used to represent, before the boundaries changed, she used to represent Junction City. I'm excited to be able to have that voice coming from this region as a speaker. If you don't know, there are the 3 most powerful elected positions in the state: Speaker of the House, Senate President, and Governor. Each one of those bodies, each one of those people has veto authority. Nothing will pass the House that the Speaker doesn't at least tacitly agree with. And because budget bills all start in the House, no budget bill will leave the House that the speaker does not agree with. So it is very important that we've got that. All committee appointments, assignments that you get or don't get are at the will of the speaker. Any appointments, some of the ones I read outside that I've received, come at the will of the speaker as well. So 3 most important positions that we have in the state, and we've got one sitting here in Lane County. And I personally like Representative Fahey. She and I get along well. We talk well. Certainly don't agree on everything, but in order to be able to work with her, it's good, and I'm excited about that. And she has already done some things that are really nice, that are really I'm optimistic about going forward for a future legislative session in terms of them being bipartisan. One of the things that she has done in talking to I'm a Republican, so in the minority, our caucus minority leader, Jeff Helfrich, one of the things that she has done is she's going to let him have input on which Republicans go to which committees. It might sound small, that has never happened. The fact that she's going to now let the minority leader have say on which of those caucus members get to go on which committees is huge. And so again, that bodes well, in my opinion, for going forward to actually having a nice functioning legislature that works well and actually talks about the issues and tries to come up with good public policy. So excited about and optimistic about going forward. Some of the things that we passed just on a high level, and again, with it being Child Abuse Prevention Month, we did a number of things in that area, which I'm excited that we're able to do.
I'm sorry.
No worries. In the long session, there are some programs that usually get funded that didn't get funded. They were left out for whatever reason. So we got money going to summer school programs, even though not all districts are going to get funding for it. We at least got some funding back in there. So a lot of those districts now are going to get funded. We got funding for relief nurseries. There's some funding that they didn't get fully funded in the long session. We got some money going to relief nurseries now. Child advocacy centers. We got some funding. We got some other legislation that are favorable to them. As a former police officer, I really know the value of child advocacy centers and what they do for kids. And the fact that we're able to support them, very happy we could do that. And the other group that we got money for is the Internet Crimes Against Children. We actually able to give DOJ some additional funding so they can ramp up that staff and they can actually work through that caseload that they need to deal with. So we did some really good things this session in getting some funding out to where it needed to go. So very happy about that. As I mentioned, we were allowed to submit 2 bills. The 2 bills that I submitted, the first one is one that I first submitted in the long session. It died in the Ways and Means process. And so this session, I took out everything that sent it to Ways and Means. I had some money in there that I was hopeful to get to FFA and 4-H. I'm not going to be able to do that with this bill, so I'll find other ways to make that happen. But this tightens up animal abuse laws. And unfortunately, here in Lane County, if you pay attention to the news, every now and then we get 30, 40 horses, some of them starved, other animals that have starved to death as well. So this tightens the animal abuse regulations up with respect to that and to address that. The governor signed this on March 27th. And again, I'm excited that I was able to get that passed this session. The second bill, and this is one of those complex topics, happy to talk as in-depth as you would like, is House Bill 4056. The governor signed this on April 4th. And this bill I ran this bill at the request of Association of Oregon Counties. And if you have heard of the Tyler versus Hennepin case, this is the U.S. Supreme Court case that said that counties can no longer keep excess monies on a tax foreclosed property because it's a takings, it's violation of the takings clause. So historically, what counties would do as they go through the foreclosure process, once the counties dispose of that property, they legally can take, all the back taxes, any fines, any fees, anything that they put into remediate that property, dealing with waste, dealing with structures, making it, getting rid of the hazards. They're allowed to recoup all of their money that they put into that property and what they're due, including cities, because cities also get the property tax money as well. So counties would distribute that. If after all those legally permitted monies were taken, if there was money left over, the counties would keep that money. And there were some defined reasons or defined ways that they could spend it for a public benefit. They could give it to parks. They could do some other different things with that. They can no longer do that. And so the purpose of this bill was to bring the counties into compliance with this US Supreme Court case. And I worked on this bill quite a bit. The bill that I wanted, I wasn't able to get there. But with the help of Representative Nathanson, the bill went before the Revenue Committee, and she's the chair of the Revenue Committee. We were able to get something to pass. And what that something is, it basically has three things to it. One of the things that it does, it has Department of Revenue now bringing together and facilitating all the stakeholders. Because as soon as you start talking about property tax and property tax foreclosures, now you've got lien holders in there, you've got property owners, you've got some other people that have a vested interest and a stake into those proceeds. So trying to bring all the stakeholders together to come up with something that we can submit again in the next long session in 25. One of the other things that came out of that bill is that counties will no longer be going through that foreclosure process. They're going to pause. And so the foreclosure process is a 6-year process. With the first 3 years, you can be delinquent on your taxes. The counties then file a notice with the court. The court can find against the property owner, and then that starts a redemption period, and that redemption period is 2 years. So again, this is a 6-year process. At the end of that 6-year process is when the county can take, the deed gets transferred to the county. So that whole 6-year process will continue, but the counties will not continue to take the deed on those properties till we get this sorted out, except for, and this is the other provision that we're able to get in there, except for there's another statute that allows counties to take the deed for properties that are either abandoned and or for waste. If you have, property that needs to be remediated, it's waste, it's a hazard, counties will still continue to take those kinds of properties. Because, one of the key things is I want cities and the counties still be able to deal with some of those troublesome properties that might be out there and solving some of those problems. So we'll be working through that. I was on the phone with Department of Revenue today. We've got a number of meetings coming up over the next few months. Their report is due back to the Revenue Committee in September, and then we'll develop some legislation out of that. So any questions about property tax foreclosure? Okay. Some of the other things that we do at the legislature and is we go through and we ask for capital funding for projects. And this is the way that we can advocate for the local projects within our districts for those needs that we have. And this is a very competitive process because again, there are 60 of us in the House, there are 30 in the Senate. We all want money for our districts. We all have projects. We all want to help our local communities. And in this district, I have 8 cities that I represent, including parts of Eugene. 11 school districts. I don't remember how many fire districts that I have. I think it's probably about 8 fire districts, if not more. So there are a lot of infrastructure projects, a lot of needs throughout the district. And so I try to advocate as best I can to get money back into the district to help out some of our local communities and our special districts. And when we did a regional delegation town hall in Eugene a few weeks back, Speaker Fahey said that she did the math and the amount of requests was 10 times the amount of money that was available. So there are a lot of requests that do not make it. And it's not because they're bad ideas, not because of they're not worthwhile, but some projects just get cut and some projects don't get what they ask. They might only get partial of what they ask. And, again, as a regional delegation, the way that we go about identifying projects is I start collecting data, I start collecting information, start compiling the projects, and my staff works with the folks that are proposing the projects, try to get them as far as we can so that I can sell them, so that I can advocate for them, so I can forward them on to those folks that actually make those decisions. Because again, as you get higher up the leadership pyramid in the House and also in the Senate, fewer and fewer people make those decisions. So try to advocate and connect with them and sell the projects as best I can. And what we do as a regional delegation is we all get together beforehand and we talk about the projects because we want to support each other. We view this as a region and we want to support the region. And we don't want to compete against each other. We don't want to compete against the same for the same dollars. So we did, as a region, we did really well in getting some money back into the district and helping out some of our local communities. What we do as we went through and beginning of this session, if you remember, there were some key things that we talked about, some key funding sources and themes. First one, as I mentioned earlier, were the shovel-ready projects for behavioral health. And we were able to bring some money into the district for that. Again, housing and homelessness was a key issue for the governor and something that she really was advocating for. And then we look at city and community infrastructure projects. So those were 3 bills, 3 separate funding packages. And that's how we tried to advocate and try to sell and make that connection with all the projects going forward. And through all those various funding bills, I was able to get 5 projects at least to the governor's desk. And I'll clarify that term in one second, why I'm saying at the governor's desk. There was $900,000 that we were able to get to redo the Bear Mountain Communication Tower by outside of Cresswell Cottage Grove area, as well as buy some emergency management radios for that. We was able to get $1 million for Junction City for their Alderwell project. I was able to get $3 million to Cottage Grove for their water and infrastructure project because they've got a parcel of land that they're going to look to build 500 plus homes on. Their original request was 4.5, but for this budget bill, they capped it at 3. So they got 3 of the 4.5. So we got some money for there. And then the other project we got money for was $4 million to Willamette Family Treatment to build a medical detox and residential facility. So again, building that capacity here regionally is very important. The one project, and the reason why I say on the governor's desk, if you've read the paper recently, the governor has identified 7 projects that were in this bill, Senate Bill 1530, that she's looking at potentially vetoing. And one of those is Cresswell. There's $1 million in there for the city of Cresswell to help with their wastewater treatment plant. And if you're familiar with what's going on with Cresswell, they have a moratorium placed on them by DEQ. And they have certain steps at housing moratorium. They've got certain steps they've got to go through to do connections. And the $1 million that we asked is going to go to that wastewater treatment facility. And they're going to conduct some steps. If they get that money, they're going to be able to do these things, and they're going to be able to connect to a few more homes, a few more houses, and it's going to improve their housing allotment. So production allotment. So I'm hopeful that this is going to happen, that we're going to be able to keep that money going to the city of Cresswell for their needs, because they absolutely need it for some of the issues that they're facing. So I think she's got another week to decide whether she's going to veto it or not. And that's what a lot of our phone calls and emails are about, is making sure that Cresswell has all the support that they need, that this project still goes through, because it passed through the House, passed through the Senate. We have one more person that we need to convince that this is the right thing and it's connected to housing, then we're good to go. Also, I want to list a few projects that we didn't get funded, because usually for at least the last 2 sessions for me, I usually have about 15 capital projects that are solid projects ready to go that I advocate for and try to get funded. A few of them, and this is the one that I was surprised of all the projects that I submitted. I thought this one was going to get funded, and it didn't. It was for West Fur. They requested $600,000 to rebuild the city hall and a fire station. For West Fur, $600,000 is huge. Their city hall, I think, was built in 1960. So I thought we were going to be able to get this to go, and it's not. So I'll keep looking for ways to help fund them and their projects. At Junction City, they had another well project, the Rain Tree project, that didn't get funded. And unfortunately, here in Coburg, the water tank rehab facility, the request for 2.3 didn't get funded. So I'll keep looking for ways to get that funded and keep that on my radar as well, to try to keep that going forward. Blue River also had funding requests for their $4.5 million for their wastewater project. Blue River's still recovering, and because it's right next to the McKinsey, there are tighter environmental regulations that they've got to go through. So they still need another $4.5 million to go forward to get some of their wastewater system going. There's another project up in Blue River. It's called The River. Not sure if you guys have heard of that, but it's an entertainment venue. And they're looking at for concerts, for emergency evacuations, for economic development. So hopeful that I was trying to get money for them as well, so they can go forward with that project. That didn't get funded. And then the last group, Row River Fire Response, they're trying to come together and have a fire district here in Row River outside Cottage Grove. They didn't get funding. I got them funding last time around in the long session. They didn't get funded this time, but they're going to be on the ballot in May. And so we'll see what that looks like for that new fire district. Any questions about capital projects and how all that works? Anything else?
No, it seems to me, it seems to us, there are a lot of needs, particularly around water and wastewater, but we're not the only community. I mean, there are so many needs across the state and across the nation. So we're always disappointed when we don't get funding, but
you know, again, there's a lot of hands out and we do understand that money is tight and costs have escalated. That's really difficult for all of us.
Yeah, Mayor, you are absolutely right. And, I'll keep working on getting this, last session, this session, I was able to get money to come into the district and keep working on the long session to get more money in here. And Coburg certainly on the top of the list. There are a lot of concerns and needs in Coburg. So keep advocating and hopefully we can get some money coming in. Yes, Counselor.
Maybe just a quick question about the kicker. As a person who got my taxes back recently and we got the kicker, that was nice, but the kicker is because they project a level of spending or revenue. And can you just go over that quickly? I mean, it seems like, why don't we have more money for these projects if we didn't have this kicker coming back to us?
The kicker, I think it's 2%. I don't want to make sure it's not 2.5%. But if the analyst predictions are off by 2%, so if the state generates more revenue and income tax by more than 2%, then that money over that 2% is the kicker. That's the money that comes back to actually taxpayers. So the way that I think about the kicker, really, it is an evaluation of the ability for the economic analysts to accurately predict what the economic scenario is going to be in Oregon. And if they're off, we get money back. So that's essentially what it is. If they had upped their economic predictions by 2%, then there would be no kicker.
And
So go
as
ahead.
I understand, that would take a constitutional change to
The-
change that.
The constitutional change would be that if the kicker if we replace the kicker or did away with the kicker. So, but if the economic analyst, they estimate that the state revenue is going to be here. If they're off by 2%, and if it's really here at least 2% higher, then everything above their estimate over that 2% is what comes back as a kicker. And so in order to get rid of that, yes, it would have to be that constitutional change. And there's no political appetite that I see in the legislature to do anything along those lines. And I don't think there's any appetite by Oregonians broadly to want to do anything different with that. There are conversations, certainly. Senator Golden had an idea that kicker would come back, and that's how we could start funding some of the emergency management throughout the state. But those are conversations, those are ideas. There's not a whole lot of, that I can tell, a political will to make some of those things actually happen and to pass the House and the Senate and then get signed by the governor.
It's lovely to get the money back. I don't think anybody would argue with that, but I think many people that I have talked to said, just as Councilor Lehman was saying, what if we put some of this money, maybe 1% of that money back into some of the projects that need to be funded?
Yeah.
Those are conversations that I've heard in my circle. And I'm sure they're repeated to some level across the state.
Yeah, they absolutely are. They absolutely are. And again, it comes back to broadly the people of Oregon. Are they going to support that? Are they going to ask that of the legislature to come together and make that happen? What does that actually look like? Is it 1%? Is it 0.5%? Is it something different? And what are those projects? So, okay. A couple of the other bills that I want to talk about. And again, happy to get it as in-depth as you want to and as meaningful and informative to you. The first one is House Bill 4002. And once again, this was the policy side of the Measure 110 fix. And ultimately what came about in House Bill 4002, basically a 3-step process. And this is fairly new to the state of Oregon. The conversation evolved, if you remember, from the original proposal by the other side of the aisle was a C misdemeanor. And as a former police officer and other folks in law enforcement, a C misdemeanor is the lowest level of crime. And there's not a lot that happens at a C misdemeanor. It's a low fine level, not much time in jail. And there's not the term of art that is used, governmental interest in pursuing C misdemeanors because there's such a low level of crime. And part of the reason is, as a police officer, going and arresting somebody for a C misdemeanor because they might possess a little bit of narcotics and risk escalating that situation unnecessarily so that force is used or that something tragic happens. There's not a whole lot of interest, governmental interest in making something a huge ordeal when it doesn't need to be that. There are other ways to solve that. My side of the aisle, we held firm on an A misdemeanor because we wanted that governmental interest and we wanted to have something to really encourage people to get into treatment. With the way that Measure 110 went, and what happened. And, if I remember right, the surveys at the time, 60-70% of Oregonians supported recriminalizing to a certain extent, at least changing Measure 110. There's some citizen initiative petitions that were, had a lot more restrictions, a lot more penalties than what we ultimately passed. And so there was encouragement for some of the Democrats and some of the folks that were not in favor of recriminalizing to recriminalize and move. And where we finally ended, it's called an unclassified misdemeanor. And unclassified misdemeanors have been around for a while. There might be some for city codes. When I worked for Springfield, we had unclassified misdemeanors for a lot of the city code violations, littering or, spitting on the street or whatever it might be. And this special unclassified misdemeanor, it is a crime. It is punishable by up to 180 days in jail. There are sanction units. So if somebody were to violate their probation, they can spend another 90 days in jail. And the way that the process works, it is the first step, it is deflection. And deflection is something new to the state, although there are some similar programs. Marion County has a similar deflection program. And some of what they do really impacted and was modeled in the bill. State of Washington also has something similar. And so that was also used in constructing what that deflection program looks like. But each county now, including Lane County, is going to have to develop their own deflection program and see what that looks like. And just think of deflection as basically a pre-conviction Dewey diversion, right? Same kind of thing. You haven't been convicted yet, but it's that first step in encouragement to get people into treatment. The second step, if somebody chooses not to go into treatment at that point in time, or if they don't complete their treatment, the next step is a conditional discharge. And this is where the district attorney gets involved and now has a little more leeway in trying to encourage and force them into treatment. If the conditional discharge doesn't work, then the next step is actually going to court and being convicted. And that is where the judge steps in and can sentence up to maximum 180 days, put them on probation. They have the sanction units hanging over their head to complete treatment. My personal take is I supported the A misdemeanor. I supported the recriminalization because with behavioral health, this is one way to get some people the treatment that they need. It's not going to be the only door. We need so many more doors to open up to get people into treatment. And at the same time, we've got to build that back end capacity so we have a place for them to go. And I say that because this whole process, it is going to be an ongoing process. It needs to be an ongoing conversation at the legislature where we have funding, but an ongoing conversation in the communities to let us know, what does this community need? How can we help? And what programs need to be stood up? What capital infrastructure needs to be stood up? Because every aspect of this process is going to take money and people. And we already have workforce shortages. Right now, we have the public defense shortage. And I hear about that on the Public Safety Ways and Means. So we're trying to build up that agency. But we've got more public defenders than we do district attorneys. I think it's a 3-to-1 ratio. We need more district attorneys. We don't have enough judges. This session, we also approved 3 more judges for 3 counties throughout the state, but we need more judges. And then we need all the back end behavioral health. So a lot of money is going to need to be pumped into this system. And the way that I look at deflection, even though it wasn't ideally what I would have liked to see, I go in with it, okay, look, we've got to do everything we can to make this work. Because if it doesn't work, then we know we tried, we know why it doesn't work, and we can make the necessary changes. If we went in with the intent to sabotage or to not put our best foot forward, it's going to fail. We really don't know why, or it might not achieve the best that it could, even though, it might ultimately not be the right thing. We might need to make changes. But to really help those folks with behavioral health issues, with addiction, with battling substance use disorder, we really need to try to make this work. So I'm interested to see at Lane County how Lane County starts putting this together and how we can support it. And again, how all the cities and communities can come together and how it works with Coburg Police Department. What can they expect? An officer finds somebody on the street. Are they going to give them a citation? Are they going to haul them away? What are they going to do? What are their decision-making possibilities? What's the department philosophy going to be and the direction coming from the chief going to be? And then as a city, what can they expect and what can friends and family expect as well throughout this whole process? So it's going to be an ongoing thing and an ongoing conversation. So anything else about 4002? Any other questions, any concerns? Okay. Moving on to the next big bill that we passed, the housing bill, Senate Bill 1537. I'm not sure if the council's had a chance to digest this and look at the impacts. It's an omnibus bill. There are a number of different things in there. The one thing that I talk about, because it is an interesting concept. I'm not fully bought into it because I have some concerns, but it's the creation of the new agency. It's the Housing Accountability and Production Office, HAPO. And this new agency is supposed to work with cities and local communities to reduce administrative burden, to increase the ability for housing production. And I'm not sure how this is really going to work. They've got some mandates. They also have some granting authority, so some funding can come through them. So I'm excited about that. Anything that we can do to help the cities and local communities improve the housing production is a good thing. The concerns that I have is there are also some regulatory and some oversight. And I don't want HAPO now to be a LUBA light. I don't want this now to be something that people appeal to, and that now cities have to bear the burden of putting all the documentation together, of testifying, of everything that goes, similar to going to LUBA. I don't want this to be that case. So if it lives up to the mandate and the goal of improving and reducing administrative barrier and improving cities and communities' ability to build homes, that's a good thing. I'd love to see that happen, but that's what I've got my eye on, to see actually how it rolls out and what's going to happen with that. The one bill that I'm also excited, I used to work for Lane County Parks, and so recreational immunity is something that is a big thing for me. I worked with it a lot. It was very important. If you're not familiar with recreational immunity, this is what protects recreation providers and private organizations and people that let people onto their lands for purpose of recreation. It protects, it gives them liability. It protects them from somebody, twisting an ankle in a hole, and then they're getting sued. So there was a court case that came out of Newport where somebody slipped on a bridge that was maintained. It was icy, and she sued. And my opinion, it was a bad court decision, but basically it threatened it away with recreational immunity. And so the insurance companies, CCA, city county insurance, their recommendation basically was for all cities and recreation providers to stop. No more trails, no more anything, because of that liability exposure was too extreme. So this bill, it wasn't perfect because it's only a temporary fix for the next year. This is a conversation, again, we're going to have in 2025. So any parks that are in the city, this is a huge issue because the liability side of it. If we do not get this fixed, then the city is going to have to make a decision of how much liability you're going to be willing to accept for somebody twisting an ankle, breaking a leg, doing those things, which when you're walking in a field, it's going to happen. It's expected to happen, that there's going to be some sort of danger, some sort of hazard that might creep up and get you. So the primary group that you can imagine is opposed to this as the Oregon Trial Lawyers Association. They like to sue cities in the county. So my apologies, any Oregon Trial Lawyer Association members on the council are listening in, but that's the group that we actually have to fight against to be able to get some good legislation to protect our recreation providers. This includes our large timber owners that let people hunt and fish on their property. I talked to one before this, and they were going to shut down their property to hunters, people hunting and fishing, because they can't afford the liability exposure either. So this is a huge issue for the state of Oregon, as exciting about recreation and everything that we do in the state outdoors. So the other one that I'll talk about one briefly, 1596, Senate Bill 1596 is the right to repair bill. This is one that I supported. Apple was really the only group that opposed it, and Google was for it. You can get into large competition between international companies about why one would support and one would oppose. But one of the things that this bill does that I'm excited about is that, and I'm hopeful that it does, is that it allows and encourages small businesses. So folks that, want to repair phones, want to repair mobile devices, do those types of things, that they can do it a little bit easier. And those folks that are entrepreneurials and can do the technology side of things and build things, hopefully now that they've got a little bit better ability to do that. Apple was opposed because of a provision in there called parts pairing. And there are 7 components in an Apple phone that you had to use an Apple part because they had to sync it directly to your specific phone. And if they didn't do it, then your phone's not going to work. So the 3 provisions in there, it is the parts pairing side. It says that they can't throttle, they can't reduce the efficiency of your phone and the speed of your phone because you're using, a non-Apple part. So there are three provisions in there that they opposed. One of the things I always like to give people credit where credit is due. So I listened to the Senate hearing on this, and Senator Golden went through those 3 points when Apple was testifying in the public hearing and said, Apple, do you do this? No. Apple, do you do this now? No. Apple, do you do this now? No. So the 3 points that Apple was opposing, they said in public hearing that they don't do those now. So then why are you opposing it? So take that for what it's worth, but I'm excited about 1596, and I'm hopeful that it does a lot for small business and small business owners. The other one that is a important thing here regionally, again, credit where credit's due, is Representative Nathanson's bill to address the closure of University District Hospital in Eugene. And if you remember, that happened, September, I think, is when it closed. And that left a hole because now both hospitals are on the east side of I-5 with McKinsey and Riverbend. And what that does for Eugene Springfield Fire, it adds time to their ambulance trips. And so Representative Nathanson brought a number of us together. We had a couple work group meetings, and she really identified some key things to try and fill some of these voids. And one of those was to fund $1 million for a year to pay for an ambulance crew to cover that time, because it's about another 20 minutes round trip that an ambulance is not able to respond to calls simply for that excess travel time because they don't have someplace closer to go. So Eugene Springfield Fire, they're using an older ambulance. They've got what they need. So it's just funding the operational side to ensure that we've got another crew to fill that void. One of the other things that I'm really excited about in there, it is an innovation fund. And what this is looking at how can we be more innovative with the delivery of healthcare services throughout the region. And that could be, are we going to bring providers to people on the street? So instead of having an ambulance come pick somebody up on a street, taking them to the emergency room for what might not be an emergency level need of care, that takes time from the ambulance, takes time away from the ER. Everybody else in the ER now has that long wait time. How can we bring services to them and hopefully free up that system a little bit more? The other thing that we talked a lot about is what can we do with nurse calls, online nurses, and that nurse phone lines. So one of the ideas is that somebody calls 911, 911 operator answers the call. It's not an ER level type of injury, that they can have access to nurses and transfer that person to a nurse on the call that then can help with the healthcare program. So how can we deliver healthcare a little bit better, a little bit more efficiency? And I like this particularly on the emergency management side. You know, as we had the ice storm, the local clinics closed. They had no power. Employees couldn't get there. And all the folks that had slip and fall accidents after that, as soon as the ice melted, everybody went to the emergency room. So there's a huge backlog of people at the emergency room that really weren't emergency level injuries. They could have been handled elsewhere. So how can we alleviate some of that? And how can we help our communities? And how can we do this a little bit better in emergency? So that's why I'm excited about Representative Nathanson's bill. One of the other ones I'll just touch on quickly, Representative Mannix, who was in the legislature for 10 years in the 90s. He ran for governor in the early 2000s. He's now representing Salem again. And he updated his stalking bill that he had passed in the 90s, and it updated the stalking bill to include all the technology we didn't have in the 90s. So air tags, all the different ways that a stalker can now could track the victim that didn't exist. This updated that. So this is a great bill that now helps protect victims and gives law enforcement different ways to actually hold people accountable for their actions as they go through and they stalk people. So I was excited and very grateful for his work on getting that done and getting that passed. And the last one that I'll talk about that passed, first time in 49 years, campaign finance reform. You know, this is one that going into the session, nobody thought was going to happen. It wasn't on anybody's radar, at least not on my radar. I mean, it's been a general conversation here and there in the papers and those kind of things, but to actually have legislation come forward. And again, the part of the reason why this came forward is because there's some initiative petitions that were getting signatures and gaining momentum. So this is a way for all the parties to come together and figure out, okay, what are we actually going to do and what can we pass? So this does not take full effect until 27. So it's not in effect during this campaign cycle or the next one. There are certain elements that become effective during that time frame, but it won't be fully effective until 27. So first time in 49 years. And one of the things that I'll talk about that did not pass, I certainly support, particularly on the behavioral healthcare bill committee, And it came from Representative Bowman, who's now the majority leader. As soon as Representative Fahey became speaker, left the void, Representative Bowman out of Tigard now is the majority leader. And his office is next to mine. I sit with him on the committee. And so we talked about this quite a bit. And this is the modernization of healthcare, the corporatization of healthcare, and some of the issues that we're facing with mergers and acquisitions and the impact of some of these publicly traded companies on the healthcare sector. If you read the paper today, there's articles about Oregon Medical Group, and that there are a lot of providers now that have left. There are a lot of people without primary care. And there are folks that if they want to continue seeing Oregon Medical Group as primary care, now they have to go and get a different insurance company. I think it's Optum, if I remember correctly. So this is a huge concern. This is also what we talk about with pharmacy benefit managers. And it's the vertical integration of publicly traded companies that force you to go somewhere that are on their train in their vertical chain. So you have a medical provider, an insurance company that provides you to go, that requires you to go to a medical provider. So all that money stays within that corporate chain, that vertical integration. My concern because of that, same thing with Corvallis. Amazon now is getting into the pharmacy side of things as well, that you have these large, massive publicly traded companies beholden to shareholders that are now going to, my opinion, negatively impact the actual healthcare that people get when they go to their primary care providers. They're going to be dictating what you can and what you can't do, and also putting unnecessary restrictions on providers. I've talked to some folks that have worked for corporate medical businesses before, and there are strict guidelines. 10 minutes with the patient, then you're on to the next one. 10 minutes with the patient, on to the next one. It's not delivering the care that people need, and it's not building that relationship and ensuring that that patient gets what they need. Because there are some complex medical issues that people go to, and there's an understanding of it. And my concern is that we're not going to be doing a very good job here in Oregon if this continues. So that is a very complex bill. It's a complex topic. It spreads out. The medical community were opposed and for it. Doctors throughout the state, doctors in this district, and organizations in this district, practices that I talked to, some were, yes, do this, pass this. Other words were like, no, this is going to impact us. I ultimately voted against this bill. And the reason I voted against this bill is because the question that to me has not been answered adequately yet is what to do with existing practices and businesses. What can we do as a state? What authority do we have as a state to tell a business, no, now you cannot own anymore. You have to sell your shares. You have to reorganize your corporation to meet these standards. And the basic standards for the bill is at least 51% of the organization has to be owned by somebody with a medical license to ensure that doctors are still in charge of making decisions for healthcare. So it's a 51-49 split. So private equity would be 49% of that. The other concern, I don't have the answer to it, but the other conversation out there is a 49% share in a medical organization, a practice, is that enough to entice private equity to come in? The healthcare sector needs private equity. That's investment. That's how improvement, that's capital projects, that's technology, that's everything that we need. But will they come in for a 49% share? I don't know the answer to that, but that's the other side of that we've got to work through and figure out. So this is going to come back in the 25 session. I'll be working with Representative Bowman to try and get those words right and figure out what to do with existing corporations because it is split and it's a complex issue and a lot of things go into that. So those are the bills that we passed. That's the one that I talk about that we didn't pass. And just another moment or two, preparing for the 25 session, it's going to be the transportation session. Again, we're going to be talking about all these issues as well. We talk more about than one issue, but the focus is going to be transportation. And so as I talked about capital projects, now looking forward to, okay, what do we need to do in this district for transportation projects? How far do we need to advance them so that we get to a point when we have an opportunity, we can jump on an opportunity and ask for some money, try to get some funding to come on in to the district. And the 4 projects that I've got so far, and fortunately met with Mr. Hanks and some folks the other day talking about the I-5 interchange. So hopefully we can get that to a position where at least part of that process, because it sounds like it's going to be a many-year, multi-phase process. Where can we go? What can come February of 25, what can I ask money for to help out with that process and offset some of those costs for the city? The other one is in Cresswell. If you like going to the Cresswell Bakery like I do, you go through the jog right over the train tracks, and then they want money because they want to redo that downtown side and they want to do something different with that intersection. Oak Ridge, they want to do something different with Highway 58 going through town, particularly because they don't have AD accessible sidewalks and curb cuts. If nothing else, they want to be able to have some accessibility along Highway 58. They have some other ideas. We'll see what we can do there. And then the other one is just pavement condition. Cottage Grove particularly, they have asked for money to help with their paving, just because it's getting in such disrepair, and they have a very small budget as well. And it's tough for them to stay up on keeping their roads safe. So that's what I've got. Please feel free to ask any questions, anything else you want me to go in depth about. And again, you can always reach out at any point in time, send me an email, give me a call. Happy to talk about any other topics or issues that you guys are facing or questions that people in Coburg are asking.
What is your phone number?
We'll get that contact information out to counselors. Anything else?
All right. Well,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much for your time. And again, thanks for having me on the agenda. I greatly appreciate it. It's good to be here.
Sounds like the
Thank you.
short session was a lot more productive.
It was very productive.
Yeah.
It was
Thank you.
in a good way.
Thank you for that. Okay, let's back to the agenda here. We have the second reading of ordinance A 255 and ordinance repealing the ordinance A 91-C and authorizing the adoption of public contracting rules and staff spending authority by resolution. So City Council will now conduct a second reading of the ordinance A 255, an ordinance repealing the ordinance A 91-C and authorizing adoption of the public contracting rules and staff pending authority by resolution. This is the first reading. The first reading and public hearing was held on March 12th, 2024 at the City Council meeting. And there will be a staff report by Mr. Hanks.
Right. I'm not sure if we want to take a
Oh,
slow
do
pause,
we need
maybe,
to
and
take a pause? Yes,
but yeah, I'll just wait.
thank
but,
you.
Yeah,
I knew that, but I didn't
it's all right.
process it.
I'll just maybe take an opportunity to thank Representative Conrad for being on
Yes.
that call. Courtney Flathers from Regional Solutions pulled a meeting together. I put a little note to it in the city administration report. We can talk further, but both Commissioner Buck and State Representative Conrad were on that call Friday morning, and it was very useful to kind of get everybody up to speed. There's a few new people in the mix, and a lot of steps, as the representative said, in making headway on the interchange, and thought it was productive. So thanks for your help there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And look forward to us contacting you. Okay.
All right, so back to
Thanks.
public contracting. This is, as the mayor said, this is second reading. So the materials in the packet are pretty identical to what you had at first reading. And if you recall, we kind of went an overview of this, but I'll give you the kind of the skeleton view of what we're trying to accomplish here. All of our current public contracting rules are embodied in the current ordinance A91C. What this does, so the negative of having all of our rules embedded in that current ordinance means that it's very cumbersome to update those, time consuming, just multiple meetings and hearings and all of that. And as we talked about last meeting, state regulations relating to public contracting change every session, some way or another. Sometimes it may not affect how we function, but every session public contracting laws change. So the objective here is to repeal the old ordinance that contains all of that, including spending authority, including just a dated, useful but dated set of rules, and instead adopt this packet. And the packet is three things. The ordinance repeals the old ordinance and basically is relatively short because what it's doing is it's setting the table, it's authorizing and approving the adoption of public contracting rules by resolution rather than embedding them in the ordinance. So it's really a umbrella over the top of all this that allows the council to approve and then modify much more flexibly contracting rules as they come up. And what it brings with it, then there are two resolutions then that come on the heels of the ordinance, should council want to go that direction. The first resolution is to actually adopt, that's the thick part of this packet, is adopt a full set of public contracting rules that are very, very consistent with Oregon state law and OARs and all of the common procedures that most cities use. Most cities do have exceptions that they will point out. But the trend, overwhelmingly is because they get changed so often, is to really stay standardized with the state law and deviate as little as possible unless there's some overwhelming local need and desire to do that. So that resolution 2024-2 adopts all of those, that whole public contracting packet. And in order to do so, you have to not adopt the Attorney General's model rules and instead adopt that packet. As we talked about with the Carrie, who from local government law group, who helped us put this all together. What this allows us is then every year we get so it just becomes a regular January or February adoption where we update our public contracting rules consistent with what happened in the prior short or long session at the state. So we're always current. And that's a once a year, and then we can highlight any changes and talk about what has changed from one to the other. And then in order to do that and get out of the Attorney General's model rules, there's another exhibit attached to that resolution that are findings similar to a land use approval. You have to make findings that give you that authorization or defend that decision. And then the final resolution that's a part of this packet is 2024-03, and that one's a little more straightforward. And we talked about this one probably the most at the last meeting, was the spending authority and the limits of spending and contracts for the city administrator, for department heads, and then line staff. And that one comes along in the package as well. So the result of tonight's work all culminates in then being effective 30 days from council's decision, should they approve. And then the resolutions are worded to go into effect the same time. So all of it then as a package becomes effective May 9th, if council is willing to move forward. I'll tag on a little piece that goes back to the quorum and vacancy and all of that. The way the Coburg's new charter works is there's a different definition for how a quorum is established versus a voting on ordinances. Since ordinances are the kind of the highest level decision-making because they're laws, local laws, the charter is written to say that a majority of council must approve an ordinance for it to move forward. Tonight, little did we know, that puts us on, right at the edge. A majority of the council is, because there's a vacancy, is 3. It's not a majority of the quorum. So if it was worded as a majority vote of just a quorum, it could be a 2-to-1 and it would pass. It needs to have all 3 to pass tonight. So just wanted to make sure procedurally you were aware of that. If there are concerns that you would want to, you might be considering a no vote. You may also want to consider, rather than a no vote, a motion to continue, which would then move it to the next meeting. And then hopefully we would have everyone here and someone, you could still make your votes. If if there's no concerns there, that's at your choice about leaving it here or there. If there's a no vote tonight, that does kill this, and we remain with the old ordinance because it wouldn't be able to just be brought back to the next meeting. Reconsideration of votes is a very limited and legal procedural thing that has fraught with challenges. So I just wanted to let you know the framework of tonight's meeting.
So if there are questions prior to considering this or moving forward, we need to really think about that and decide and direct staff in terms of what they would like, what we would like them to bring back to us. If that's, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, the only
Councilor Layman.
question I had was just a little more context. Can you kind of describe, is this just a new change that's going across the landscape with cities to make this change? How are we comparing with other Lane County cities? Is everybody on the bandwagon to make this change? Has this been something that has been in a lot of discussion, or is this, why haven't we looked at this before? Can you kind of address those things?
I can try. I know several cities in the region, since I'm not super familiar with all of them yet. Several cities have done this already. I think from my more broad experience, in another region of the state, very different sets of purchasing and public contracting ordinances from city to city. I wouldn't say this is a sweeping thing that everybody's kind of getting on the bandwagon to do it. I think over a period, probably the last 5 to 10 years, there's plenty of examples of where people have gotten stuck when they've had unknowingly, probably, or just out of, hadn't prioritized their purchasing ordinances and kept up on them, that they've gotten stuck or had problems getting where they needed to go as a council because of the contracting rules. They had a local ordinance that may have been in conflict with a state law, so they procedurally met their own rule, but it inadvertently wasn't consistent. So as with most things, everything is fine until you run into a snag or a controversial issue, and then you're having to rely on your code. And if it's not consistent with state law and somebody's pushing back, then you have problems. So again, I wouldn't call it a sweeping change. I think it's like I said, probably in the last decade, people have been more aware. Public contracting has been more complicated each session. It's more challenging. And on the spending limit part of it, as we see how many things, the escalation in price for what's kind of, deemed kind of normal operational business, that has really escalated. So I've seen a lot of movement. That's probably the more current one that made the rounds on the city manager listserv probably within 4 to 6 weeks ago. Really a whole lot of querying each other about what are your limits, how long has it been since they've been updated. Mostly, like we talked about last time, was the timing, the slowdown of what it costs. Not that people want to have more power and authority, just that it slows down operationally. So that one's probably, I would say, is a more current thing. The idea of the core changes to the public contracting rules, some probably 15 years ago had made decisions to let's just stay consistent with state law and not create kind of a layer of our own. And so I think that's probably the separation point about which cities chose to kind of stay with more of a either a simplified version on probably a lot of those really small cities, or going, the larger cities probably had defaulted a lot earlier to following state law.
The other
Only.
question I have is, do you have any disadvantages for this change?
No, I don't think so. I think what we have some timing things and some temporary workload things to update our contract and our bidding, our RFP templates, and do a lot of reference points to make sure that we're this new set of rules, that everything that we put out when we do public improvement contracts, professional service contracts, when we do the requests for them, the RFPs and the contracts themselves, we make sure that everything is consistent. last week, we got a flow chart from Carrie's firm that was that's kind of goes along with this package that we're getting with their firm. That's fabulous. A very simplified, color coded. If it's this, go down here. Yes, no. If it's this, yes, go this direction. So I think we'll have a quick learning curve, but there is some review and updating of our contracts and templates, and we're already started at least the conversational part of that with Branch Engineering, which would be our number one, is all of our public improvement bidding contracts would change. And as I mentioned last meeting, one of the things that we almost had, a more sticky situation was the protest of the bid award for the Public Works Operations Building. To me, that was an impetus to kind of look at things and go, oh, we were almost consistent, but we weren't quite, but we were able to defend it still. But you'd rather be super secure and solid than trying to on the fly figure out, yeah, we're solid, but we're doing it by reference rather than by explicit code.
We're close, but not quite.
Yeah. And having to convince everybody that we're quite enough.
Horseshoes.
That's right. Yes.
That's right. You're absolutely right, Council.
And I hope, I guess, one of the follow-ups, I hope that what the process does is really brings it up to where we are doing this as regular operational business of annually reviewing it and making sure it stays current. That's just a systems approach to it rather than adopting something locally and then just using it for, 5 to 10 years and hoping that the types of projects we have don't happen to have been, the rules haven't changed, on those projects. So that's a really big plus to me. It does create a little bit of work for us, not much, and it's short term. And then once we get into that cycle of annual review and annual update, I think it just kind of solves the issue and keeps us out of even needing to worry, are we not in compliance?
I had a question. I might have missed something on the spending authority. In the packet
Mhm.
here, it does look like there's still two different amounts listed. Are we?
Yes. That was
Okay.
an error.
Thank you. That was on my part of, if you saw my emails on my Friday packet debacle, the short story is, man, we need Sammy. That I'll just say that. We got it through it, but it was an omission I made. I grabbed the wrong one when I slid it over into the packet machine. We have a clean copy, and that was a clear direction from council at the last meeting to have the spending authority at 75. So when we make, if and when we get to that spot to make a motion, it's 75,000 and 150 for emergencies, and then 10,000 on the department head. So yeah, that one was mine. I had a nice clean copy, took the draft watermark off it, everything, and then slid over the wrong one into the packet. So thank you for pointing that out.
Sorry, yeah.
No, that's, it needed to be pointed out.
Tool.
Yeah.
Anything else? If not, I will entertain a motion if you're feeling like you're ready to vote.
Okay.
Oh,
I move to adopt at second reading and by title only ordinance A-255 and ordinance repealing ordinance A-91 C and authorizing the adoption of public contracting rules and spending authority by resolution. And I move approval of resolution 2024
Sorry, I should have explained this. I think we need to do those and vote those independently. I should have, they are a bunch of ands, but one at a time, because we actually have the other layer that actually complicates it more is this also has to be done with, you have to be wearing both hats at the same time for part of this as the local contract review board. So you fulfill two roles. So I apologize for not explaining that part further.
at this point, we are just looking at A-255.
Yeah, that the first one. So you
Period.
Yeah,
Thank you.
period. End of statement on that.
Mhm.
So we have a motion by Counselor Lehman. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Counselor Engelbretson to adopt ordinance A-255 and ordinance repealing the ordinance A-91-C and authorizing the adoption of public contracting rules and staff spending authority by resolution. Is there any further discussion or questions? If not, I will take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We have 3 in favor, none opposed. The motion carries 3-0.
Okay, I will continue then.
Here,
Now we're going to call, now I have to call the local contract review board to order. And I will do that at 7:24. So city council, the contract review board meeting is joining the meeting to consider the next resolution. The public hearing notice was published in the Register Guard, inviting citizens to comment on the draft findings supporting the exemption of certain classes of special procurement and public improvements contracts from competitive bidding requirements. No requests to comments were received, so no public hearing will be held. Adam, do you have anything to add on resolution 2024-02?
no, I don't, unless there's the questions. I probably have complicated it enough.
It's a complicated process. And hopefully we're going to make this easier in the future.
That's right.
Okay, so I will now, the resolution of 2024-02, which Councilor Lehman read previously, a resolution of the City of Coburg and Local Contract Review Board opting out of the Attorney General's model public contracting rules and adopting public contracting rules for the City of Coburg. I will entertain a motion.
Okay, I move approval of resolution 2024-02, a resolution of City Council and the Local Contract Review Board opting out of the Oregon Attorney General model public contracting rules and amending public contracting rules with associated findings and support for the City of Coburg.
Have a motion by Councilor Lehman. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Councilor Wells to adopt resolution 2024-02. A resolution of the City of Coburg and Local Contract Review Board opting out of the Attorney General's model public contracting rules and adopting public contracting rules for the city. Is there any discussion? None? I will entertain a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
3 in favor. Any opposition? No opposition, that's a 0. So the motion passes 3-0. I will now adjourn the Contract Review Board meeting at 7:27. Thank you. Turn my page here. We can move on to the final section of that, which is resolution 2024-03, a resolution establishing purchasing authority and spending limits for the City of Coburg staff. You have a staff report, Mr. Hanks?
I don't. I think we've covered it. I'll just reiterate that this resolution, in the motion, if you could reference the selection of the actual spending limits to 75,000, 150, and 10,000,
The correct
respectively.
amounts.
Right.
Oh, and those are the amounts. They're listed, if you're haven't caught up in the package, it's item 6 and it's page 125 in the packet. And you will see that there are 2 amounts highlighted. And as we've previously discussed, it's the second amount in each of those highlighted areas.
Just a clarification, we did discuss that with the increased spending level, though, the city council will always get a copy of those contracts that you approve.
There- There would be a verbal at the following meeting.
I started a
Yes, in
template
the
for it. We can talk about it here. Yep.
Yeah. Yes. Good point. Thank you for that. Keeping us all informed, I think, is very important. Okay, anything, any other questions? I
Need a
am
motion
ready-
for that?
I am
Okay.
ready for a motion. If you're ready to move, I'm ready for a motion.
Okay, I move approval of resolution 2024-03 establishing purchasing authority and spending limits for the city of Coburg staff.
And could you say those spending limits? Could you read those out?
Okay. So for contracts in the amount not exceeding $50,000 / $75,000.
No, it would be $75,000.
$75,000.
Yes,
Emergency in amounts not exceeding $150,000. Recommend the city council approve or disapprove contract awards, change orders and amendments in the amounts over $75,000. Enter into contracts or issue permits for local concessions and street vendors pursuant to applicable city policy where the annual amount be paid to or by the city is not expected to exceed $75,000 per year. Department heads are hereby authorized to enter into contracts in amounts not exceeding $10,000. Contracts over $10,000 may be entered by department heads only with the city administrators prior written approval.
okay, we have a motion by Counselor Lehman. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Counselor Engebretson to adopt resolution 2024-03A, resolution establishing purchasing, excuse me, I need a drink, I think, purchasing authority and spending limits for the city of Coburg staff. Is there any council discussion? None, I will ask for a vote. We say those in favor. Aye. 3 in favor. Any opposed? Nope. So the motion passes 3-0. Thank you very much. Now we have, excuse me, the Pavilion Park Phase 1 subcontracts pre-authorization.
Yeah, this is a kind of a great example of that spending authority resolution that you just approved. This is an item that we went out for basically informal quotes because we're not exactly sure what the pricing will be, but there are tasks associated with the phase 1 of Pavilion Park that city staff are capable of doing, but not legally able to do. And those involve electrical and plumbing commercial license work. Since it's a parcel, it's not out in the right of way. We have the legal right to do whatever we want out with our staff out in the right of way. But when we get onto a private parcel, we're governed by the building code, just like anyone else. We are handling phase 1 internally. And so we are kind of the project manager and doing all of the earthwork and as much as we legally can do, both for cost purposes, but also for timing purposes as well. And this is all in preparation of the restroom building being delivered and craned onto site here in about a month and change. What we determined was the timing again for getting council approval once we had bids back would have put us too late to have the work done before the building gets here. So the request is a little, it's asking, we're asking for up to pre-authorization approval for me to sign up to $20,000 for an electrical trade permit or a contract, and similarly for plumbing. We expect each of those to probably be 5 to 10,000 maximum. We don't expect them to be nearly that much. And so I don't, I don't think we would need to go there, but what I wanted was to just ensure that we would be able to execute on the bids that are returned. We have decent amount of interest, but it's a little funky in terms of parts that we do, parts that they do. I think it's a little bit challenging for them to say, what is that, a $3,000, is that $5,000, so we're kind of having a lot of back and forth. Once we gave them what we included in the package, what we sent out to a bunch of vendors, contractors. So we are getting plenty of interest. We just don't know exactly where that's going to land in the price point. But like I said, I expect them to be far under, but I did not want to risk having one be slightly over my current, until May 9th, current $10,000 spending authority.
Thank you for that. Questions about the process? Not, I will entertain a motion to approve the city administrator to execute the plumbing and electrical contracts for phase 1 of Pavilion Park.
I move to authorize the city administrator to execute plumbing and electrical contracts in support of phase 1 of the Pavilion Park Improvements Project not to exceed $20,000 each. Request that the final contract amounts be reported back to council at a future council meeting.
Counselor Wells, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
A motion by Counselor Wells and a second by Counselor Engebretson to authorize the city administrator to execute plumbing and electrical contracts in support of phase 1 of the Pavilion Park Improvements Project not to exceed $20,000 each, and request that the final contract amounts be reported back to City Council at the future meeting. Is there any discussion? I will be honest and say I'm very excited for this project to be moving forward. It seems to have taken kind of a slow roll getting there, but this is a great first step. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Of 3 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes 3-0. Now we're on to resolution 2024-04, a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2024-25 capital improvement plan. Mr. Hanks.
Yes, this document is unchanged from the work session that we had at end of last month, where we went over the policy language and process component of the capital improvements plan, and then both formats of the project list. As we talked about, they're in 2 formats. The first is by fund or by major category, which is mostly by fund. And then the second sorting of the same list is projects by fiscal year. This is the CIP was last adopted by resolution in 2022. The goal is to the goal is to talk about CIP in depth twice a year. First time in the October-November timeframe after construction season, the heavy construction season is complete. We have a good sense of, where things ended up for the current projects or how they're finishing up. And then in preparation also for budget later. And then the next time we would talk about it is really during budget itself. So the goal, if we can get our all of our ducks in a row, would actually be updating this resolution in probably the November, December timeframe every year. We were a little bit later than the goal, but that gives us a little clarity for that. And then, as I've talked about at the work session, one of the other categories that we will add when we bring it back for its next round of updating is for the first few years of the projects, be a little, a lot more specific about what year different components of the project fall in. As I mentioned, it's next to impossible for a capital project to fit cleanly into one fiscal year. We've kind of pretended a little bit in this list that everything would fit in a tight, knowing that those are have spillovers on either side. But when we're working with the projects in the near term, we'll be splitting out and showing both the design dollars and the construction dollars. We'll separate those out, and then we'll also be separating out what fiscal year splits they happen in, which I think will be much easier for everyone to understand where they are in the process, where they'll see action on the ground, and also for our budgeting. We'll have a better sense of what capital dollars are being spent, because we'll clearly have projects that have dollars in the design phase and different projects in the construction phase in the same capital year. So that's our goal moving forward. But the document tonight is, as I mentioned, unchanged from the work session that gets us started in that direction.
And of course, none of this will happen until we know what the money is in the budget to move forward.
Yes, this is a plan. This is not spending authority. This is a plan, and it pulls together, projects from our various master plans and tries to sort them and incorporate them in a way that lets us plan for our fiscal, ability to do that. And maybe that reminds me of, as I said last time too, this is, probably optimistic. Or as we're getting into budget prep season right now, we're working on it as a staff. We're putting we've got a rough draft of the budget together. It's going to be probably a tough road to keep the same momentum going, just with needing additional funding sources, and then having a debt service conversation about, do our rates actually allow us to add debt service to our funds? It's great conversation to be had, but this gives us a layout of what, if we can, this is the pace that the infrastructure says we need to do. This may not be right now the pace that our finances say we can do, but when you're planning for infrastructure, this is where it should occur, and they obviously will juggle as we talk about them.
Councilor Lehman.
The last meeting, I asked the question if they were fully funded, and I thought the answer was almost.
I hopefully I said the almost in the first few years of this 6-year plan. It's now a 6-year instead of a 5-year. The first few are almost funded. I would say it's a matter of what the actual costs come out versus the engineer's estimate cost. So that'd be the only caveat to that.
And then in the first 2 years, have we got yet a priority of those lists, or are they just listed?
We are working on, as we talked about when we did our water, especially on the water, there isn't much out there on the wastewater side there isn't any for this year, other than that capacity work that we have Kennedy Jenks doing for us. But water specifically, we are very close. I had a meeting with Julie this morning, branch engineering, and what we committed to when we had our water work session was, when we get Consor, our water capacity analysis back. At the same time, we're working with Business Oregon on our water loan. That we have a really good idea of what's left. What I am still working on is where the city match component of that loan comes from. We know what our loan amount is currently, so we're close. So I think I put it in the city administration report, so you beat me to it. It's later in that document that I hope by the plan would be July work session, we would have water, and then I think streets is a pretty easy one to tag along in the July timeframe as well. So we can expand our water work session, probably to a, a year one, year two CIP, project conversation. It doesn't have to be limited to water.
It certainly is always a moving target, not knowing, I mean, we can project what costs will be, but
Yep.
that's not in our control, unfortunately.
And we'll certainly have the first year discussion along with the budget. I mean, because that's where the actual hard dollars of what you are authorizing, at least appropriating. And we'll have that nailed down really close.
Further questions, discussion? If not, I will entertain a motion to adopt the fiscal year 2024-25 capital improvement plan.
I'll move to the resolution to adopt this capital improvement policy and project list as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Counselor Engebretson and a second by Counselor Lehman to adopt resolution 2024, which is the capital improvement plan for 24-25. Is there any further discussion? No? I will entertain a vote at this time. So all those in favor?
Aye.
3 in favor. Any opposed? The answer is no. So we have the motion passes 3-0. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the contract for audit service for Umpqua Valley Finance. And again,
Yes.
Mr.
more.
Hayes, would
Yeah,
you
this
please
is,
give us a report on that?
But before I do, I'll just apologize again on this packet preparation. I was just filtering through the packet to look at the draft motion that I assembled. And my council communication isn't in there. So thank you for ad hocing a motion. That did not get slung over from one side to the other either. And I did not catch that when I reviewed the packet. So I will send you belatedly, because I have a council communication completed, just not in the packet, that probably gives I outlined hopefully what I talked about, but I just realized that. So yeah, the next item is annual contract for the next round of audits with Umpqua Valley Financial. They provided in the packet is engagement letters and contracts for both the city audit, which is the more substantial component, and then what is the component unit is our urban renewal. Pricing is just over 32,000 for the city contract and 6,000 for the urban renewal component unit. And then there's some language in the contract that should we need a single audit, there's a fee structure for that. But in the standard audits, they're a not to exceed number, with the exception of the need for a single audit, which we likely will have. If we don't do it this year, it will for sure be next. It depends on how we categorize the funds from the water loan. But either this year or next, we will have a single audit.
And tell me again, help me remember what requires a single audit.
Yeah, it's federal funds of over $700,000 in the audited year. And there's some of those depends, we may get the money from the state, but if they got it from federal, then it's federal funds for a single audit. It's not a huge deal. It's just a little more work and another process for that, for us to track.
That triggers that additional
Extra,
audit
yeah.
work.
Yeah, it's just an extra layer of details that they have to prepare.
We're dealing with federal government and
Yep.
we have to be cognizant of that.
And one thing I just add, just for kind of for the record, and make sure is, there was a RFP process for audit services in 2021. So I wasn't aware of that originally. Sammy dug that out for me, and it gave some good context to, this has been looked at relatively recently. So when we look at our package of making sure we stay updated on our various professional services, this one isn't too old. So we have, maybe it's a next year, maybe the year after that we would go out again and just, I think 5 years is a pretty good number to use to go out and retest the market. I know from talking with other city managers and other finance directors, there are not nearly as many auditors that are doing municipal audit work than there were 5-10 years ago, which is making, the auditors may not have done a fabulous job of explaining why, when we had them present to the Finance Audit Committee, why they were so late this year. It had a lot to do with a lot of single audits, because a lot of school districts and cities got federal money that don't typically, so they kind of misread their workload on that. And I think there are just too few audit firms out there. And so that's been a concern from, I've talked with other city managers that there isn't a great solution to that. I think there is actually some legislative discussion, at least, about, changing some of the due dates. So because I think I shared, I might not have, but a very high percentage of cities filed for extensions. And it's not the city staff's issue. I mean, same as here, we provided stuff in August and September that they asked for. And then we kind of didn't hear from it for a while. School districts are in the earlier due dates. So I think there's going to be some discussion at the state level about changing kind of the timelines for these, which means it'll take longer for us to get our final results, possibly. But in any event, I think we have at least a year or two before it's prudent to go out and do another RFP for audit services, and the landscape may be a little different by then.
But we ended up with a good audit.
We did.
And a clean audit. I don't think there were any recommendations, as I recall.
Nope. It was clean.
That was good news.
Yeah.
It took us a long time.
Clean and boring. That's a good thing.
Yes.
So just a quick question. Can we look at page 257 for just a second? I'm just referencing back, I think it was 2020, and I see 2020 on this document, that we restructured a number of our loans, and over the course of the loan, we were told that we saved about $1 million in interest payments and stuff. Is this an example of one of those that got restructured? And
Yeah, US Bank, this one, make sure it's the right one. Yeah, US Bank has three things, were consolidated into that. One was City Hall note, then water and sewer. It's the City Hall portion of this total is very small. So it's majority. I'm just trying to think of the account number allocation when I look at the payments. But yes, this is one. It's also one that has some interesting terms for that we may want to look at coming forward. So it hits. So they go in chunks where they're the same for years.
3% to 4%.
Yeah. So it's one that I think was a really smart consolidation, but it's still one that I think we want to look at, as the markets may hopefully improve to do something else with. But yes.
And did that also extend the number of years, or was it just restructured with the same maturity date of 2055?
I think there was a mixture of the three instruments. I think all of them had different initial maturity dates. I don't have that exact answer for you, but it probably did extend some of them out. I'm for sure it extended the City Hall component out, but it's a very small piece of the total. But that one was a shorter note than what this is. I'd have to get back to you on what the three originals were. We have that.
Pretty sure that I recall that it extended the dates.
Yep. Yeah.
But we got a much better interest rate, if I remember correctly, at that time, at the 3%.
But for it to have saved $1 million in total.
Right.
If it still extended it is kind of questionable.
I don't know that calculation, if the calculation included, you know,
It's
took
difficult
that
to
off.
Speak to that.
I know where
since
you're getting
Adam
at.
Wasn't
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
We could check it out. I can go look backwards and see. That's something that Greg and I have been working on, just wrapping our head around. You know, we have our head wrapped around the current debt and the debt payments and all that stuff. Now it's going backwards and understanding the history of that. And we're slowly getting there as we dig and as we're asked questions, which is great. So we'll dig a little further on that one.
And I think that's exactly what the questions that you're asking, Counselor Lehman, are exactly what we're saying when we need to really look at our debt ratio and where our debt is and how we're dealing with this in the future.
Yeah, and that is,
Yeah,
as
those
you recall,
great
that's
questions.
part of our, the council approved framework. One objective, you know, within that financial component of the framework is really doing a review of our existing debt service and what our debt strategy by fund will be moving forward. And that goes back to the prior item of, can we afford the CIP that we've put forward?
Okay, so I will entertain a motion to approve the Umpqua Valley Finance Contract for Audit Service, if there are no further questions. First,
I move to approve the proposed Umpqua Valley financial contract for audit services in the amount not to exceed $32,340 city and 6,000 URA.
Second.
thank you. We have a motion by Counselor Lehman and a second by Counselor Wells to approve the Umpqua Valley Finance Contract for Audit Service in the amount not to exceed $32,340 for the city and $6,000 for the URA. Is there any need for discussion? Hearing none, I will ask for a show of hands for those in favor. I have 3 in favor, any opposed? Answer is no. So the motion passes 3-0. Thank you very much. Yes. Okay, yes. Yes. And now,
Perfect, yeah.
yes, yeah, and you have the OLCs, the remaining, the 9.5.
Yes, agenda item 9.5. I like it.
This gives us just a moment to run through it.
Would you like?
Adam, as I was just glancing at your administrative report, you put a lot in about finance and taxation and what House bills passed and what didn't and all. I thought, oh, I should have looked at that before.
I know. Yeah, that
Counselor
was, I thought it was actually worked out really well because that was a
Yeah.
League of Oregon Cities summary document and he dove in a
Exactly.
little deeper on some of the meatier ones. It's a good, hopefully that worked out. It's good complimentary stuff.
Well, we'll be a little bit more knowledgeable as we're reading through. Yeah, these are the folks in the turreted blue house. You are exactly correct. They had a business, I think. Oh, what, I'm gonna chat with them.
So I can give a quick,
Okay, thank
if you,
you.
if you'd like, I can give a quick rundown
I
of what
think we're
this,
ready
this
for
item
that.
is. I think both Sammy and Megan, had some conversation with the applicant here, and, I think that their goal is opening, probably either concurrent or right around the same time as the next council meeting. So, this was, I think the applicant will very much appreciate council adding this to tonight's meeting. It's, for new, liquor license. OLCC, requires as a component of that, a recommendation from the local governing body. It's not approve or deny for council. It's a recommendation. And the step in that process really is to allow a local jurisdiction to, voice any concerns they might have with the applicant and their history. Maybe, I've seen where, an applicant is, jumps behind a different LLC and then applies under a different name, and that, there's been problematic behaviors, that the applicant has been a part of before. And so a city council can alert OLCC of some of those things. It's just a local check. But what it isn't is an approval or a denial. And so this is as you see from the application, located on 91088 North Willamette, taking over an existing space. The review of the zoning and the use, is really outside the scope of the OLCC review. Is more behavioral and problematic activities, either at the site or with the applicant. We haven't had a chance to vet this deeply with our internal staff, but I think from everything that I have heard, there has not been prior problems or issues at the particular site being applied for. And from the zoning side, it's an allowed use. All of the occupancy issues are addressed, which is related to, but a little bit different. We look at those things on a business license more so than on a liquor license. So I think the motion, if council is interested and willing, is just a motion to recommend approval of the liquor license application for Coburg Mercantile LLC.
Any questions? Counselor Wells.
Can I vote on this? I mean, this is our, the Coburg Inn. They're a tenant of ours. Is that
Do
appropriate?
you feel that you could
Yes,
proceed appropriately? that it wouldn't-
objectively, yes,
Yes.
yes.
Declare potential conflict of interest. This
Okay,
actually doesn't require the,
It does not.
right. So this is not an ordinance, so it does not, it's a recommendation, so it doesn't require a 3-0. So my actual recommendation is you have at least a potential conflict of interest, if not an outright conflict of interest, because you are the recipient of the rent payments. That is a direct conflict of interest. So I think the best course of action is for you to request to abstain, and then the council can,
Recuse yourself and
yeah,
okay, I think I should do
go
that.
forward.
I think it's cleanest, and it won't interrupt
Yeah,
the
that's
the
true.
recommendation.
That's what I didn't want
Yeah,
to do is
yeah.
not-
So what we would be recommending from council is just to allow this application to go forward to the Oregon Liquor Commission.
Right, just to recommend.
We're not,
Yeah,
we're not approving, we're not doing anything. It is an existing, the tenant that is in there now, it is the same existing use. It's not really a change in that, but what we would be doing is saying, yes, this can move forward to the OLCC.
I move to approve the recommendation for the
Coburg Mercantile.
Coburg Mercantile LLC to have their liquor license application forwarded.
A second.
Second, so we have a motion by Counselor Lehman and a second by Counselor Engebretson to approve our recommendation that this liquor license be forwarded to the OLCC.
And we'll note an abstention from Counselor Wells.
We have a yes from Counselor Lehman and a yes from Counselor Engebretson, and Counselor Wells is abstaining, so we have that passes two to one abstention. Get that out. Any council action items, any further council action items? We have administrative information reports, and then we'll ask for the liaison updates as the final order of business. Well, almost the final order of business, perhaps. Let's see. So I think we have the annual comprehensive financial reports for fiscal year 22-23, and then the administrative report in the red folder. So did we have anything further on finance?
Well, if there's any questions, I'd be glad to try and answer those. Counselor Lehman kind of poked a little bit at the audit there. So that is the audit. That's the
yeah.
final document. So I wanted to make sure that was in the
Okay.
packet for you all. It's been filed. You know, we did an extension December 31st based on the auditor's request, not ours. Got that a draft to staff, I think the end of February. We then worked with them to correct a few things. There was the way a transfer versus a revenue and expense from the URA to city. There's some terminology about was it a transfer or should it have been revenue recorded. So slight technical things. Got a version B, which is the final, which converted into the final version here, that after staff met with the auditors and reviewed and corrected some of the items from A. And as the mayor mentioned, it's a clean audit. Everything is accounted for and solid. I'm hopeful, we're hopeful, Greg and I, to have 1 year under our belt with these books and our processes and these auditors, to really leverage them a little bit more next year. I think Greg and Ann were plenty ahead of the curve in terms of providing the information this last time. So I don't know that we can improve on that, but we will stay at least consistent with that. And hopefully, as we move forward, the goal really is to get into some of the less pure standard financial parts, not deviate from those, but also get to financial policies, internal controls, some of our software security stuff, rights, authorizations, that kind of stuff, and really, bug them for their professional best practice expertise, and squeeze as much as we can out of the audit. And unfortunately, when they're behind and they're running ragged, we don't have much choice in squeezing as much as we can out of them. They did a great job, but I want more. And so does Greg. So we'll work on that and keep getting more. So even offline, if there's questions, comments, critiques, concerns you have relative to the audit and the audit process, please let us know. We're planned to start first part of August. So it rarely gets out of audit season, especially when we go long. Audit season lasts a long time. So we're going to try and make a concerted effort to help us stay on track a little tighter. But we also want to make sure that we know what you all are looking for, and particularly the one of the items that didn't go as I would have desired, and same with Greg. We both were a little disappointed was the presentation that they provided to the Finance Audit Committee. I'd love to beef that up, and I'll be working with them, and we will, on what we want to highlight. But if there are things that you are used to seeing in a presentation, or that you want to be sure the auditor straight from them covers, I'd like in our next contract, and I've already had some email exchange with them about this topic. Immediately after the Finance Audit Committee, they're well aware that we would like to see more. So I would like to make sure it's not just staff's input on what more we want to see. So if you have anything that you want to see, primarily in the presentation, but also anything that you want out of the audit itself, a lot of it is pretty structured, but there's some discretionary things that we can try and add in there. So I'd love to hear from you. Whenever, it can be later, can be.
It wasn't a bad presentation.
No.
It was rather abbreviated from previous years, which it did leave opportunity for questions, which they were able to answer to my satisfaction.
Yeah.
Counselor Smith and I both were able to attend that meeting, which was by Zoom.
Yeah.
Which is always makes it a little bit different, perhaps.
Yeah, and really, it's also an opportunity for education. Always, when you have the auditors here, it's good education from the staff side too. There's always a nugget to be learned. So that's part of a presentation as well. Can be often relatively dry. There's some tidbits about what certain reports and formats of reporting mean, and what is it telling us. I think there could be more next year.
Well, do you want to jump into the city administrator report, point out
Yep.
anything specific, or allow council to just ask questions?
Well, I'll hit the very first one with the photos on the front. We've looked at an opportunity to apply for a round of grant funding from Oregon Department of Energy, ODO, for solar. And we've looked at it kind of generically for solar on City Hall, more of the standard rooftop stuff, incremental. Those don't typically work well at our scale for the price points for grants. They're a little too small to run of the mill. The grant process here that I described in the report, we think there's a really good conceptual shot at that. Maybe not for this round. This is the third round of this, and I actually, with a fire district that I was working with in Southern Oregon, I applied, developed a grant application for round one, did not get it. So I have a few personal lessons learned from, doing a grant a second time. But also third round means that the more shovel ready stuff that was out there has already been through the grant process. So it's increases the likelihood of success. And at this point, we're still looking at what even might work and make sense. And so I wanted to throw this concept out. And if we don't make this deadline, it's just an opportunity for us to kind of put this on the slow roll, maybe for the next round. But I wanted to get a little exposure to it. I've talked with the mayor about it prior. I think it's not super challenging to get an application in. It's 100% when you include resiliency with the grant. If it's pure solar, it's a 50% grant, 50% match. If it's solar plus resiliency, which typically means storage or microgrid, battery, then it can be up to 100%. So this would be $0 out the door for the city. It's sized, if you look at the left photo, it's sized, all those blue squares are those elevated panels. I happen to be pretty familiar with the manufacturer and installer of these. That picture is from Ashland. They have expanded and are really doing well, and they've leveraged this grant a number of times for several cities and private businesses. So the idea is to match net zero energy consumption at the plant. We are about $40,000 a year in energy costs at the plant. So that number of elevated panels, systems that are shown there are equal to the annualized equal to the annualized consumption that we experience at the site, which will only go up with our Public Works Ops building being there, and then the fire department's building for a while. That will be moderately heated for some of their equipment as well. So there will be that 40,000 will only go up with rates plus additional usage. Let's see what else. The battery component really, I think, works well for us in terms of the potential for the new Public Works Ops building being our emergency operations center. We have the grant that we've executed for 2 individual home runs of fiber connecting the network independently to each building. All of our SCADA out there. So having, and if we saw from January's storms and outages, having battery backup there, in addition to the existing diesel generator that's there, makes us far more resilient. So I think it's a very compelling grant application. Beyond, we have a lot of acres out there. The challenge with creating a more commercial, industrial energy site is that we're not super close to substations, and that's a key for the large scale. That's also in a totally different category than this grant. To do it requires the siting council and Pacific Power to a much larger degree. It's very competitive on getting in the queue for Pacific Power's approvals. So that's a long shot to be a net exporter, but a net zero application where we're talking about covering the annualized cost of our project. So that one, I wanted to bring that to your all's attention and maybe just get your first take, on that concept, and see if you're all right with us at least moving forward with the first attempt at a grant.
Good idea.
Cool. Yeah, I think it'll be a fun one. And we'll see how far we get, and as you learn and move forward. So other items, the other finance piece, number 2, Greg and I went through a process with S&P Global, which was educational. I've knew of them. I've never directly done them at prior places. Our credit rating, they're a key financial services provider that provides the global investment market with credit ratings. We did drop from an AA- to an A+. AAA is the best, and then it goes in increments there. I guess there's 10 total as you go down from AAA, AA, plus and minuses. So it's still really solid. But I did want to point out that it did drop one mark, and the predominant reason is something that we've talked about before, is the relatively thin general fund balance. And that is something that when we're talking about full faith and credit, that's where our property taxes, and even if we get a revenue bond, they typically are backed by full faith and credit of the city, which is the general fund. So just another reason and value for having some ending fund balance target conversations in our financial policies, and setting them in a way that that gives us at least an objective of restoring that, upping our rating. That's not the only thing that goes into these ratings. Obviously, there's a lot of other stuff. They liked the financial, but we send them the financial policies, the CIP. There's an investment policy they asked about. I think ours is relatively simple. We don't have one. Ours is relatively simple. It's the local government investment pool. So it exists. We have investments, but we don't have a policy. And I think it's not too difficult to put a policy together, which helps our package. I don't know, by itself, it wouldn't drive us back up to the AA, but we have some good lessons learned about things that we can formalize that as a package will help us in the ratings markets. Economic development update. This one was partly why I was in that meeting with Representative Conrad and a number of ODOT staff and Lane County economic development folks. The property, the 107 acres, was recently awarded a just over $2 million forgivable loan. So basically a grant, as long as you complete the requirements for kind of pre-shovel ready development work to get the project ready. The grant category, or the forgivable loan category, is the Business Oregon's SIL program, which is semiconductor industrial lands. It doesn't mandate it to be semiconductor end user, but it looks at basically the point of that grant. There was only $10 million available, and this project got 2 of it statewide. And the idea really, I mean, it's leveraged, it gets high marks because of its proximity, obviously, to I-5 is a big piece. Where it's deficient in is the ability to serve that type of water and sewer needs. Power needs aren't as hard. They're just dollars, right? They're not as hard to come by. I guess all of them are just dollars. Some are more complicated dollars than others. From a power perspective, utilities will front that and have the investment capabilities. But it's a great, I think it's a great asset for the property owners to get that 2 million. It means that it's more highlighted, that project, because Business Oregon has kind of put a stamp on it saying it's worthy of this investment, which is really was the impetus for the regional meeting that we had. Was okay, now that there's statewide focus on that from the economic development and jobs standpoint, high density of jobs. Semiconductors are high density of jobs and high wage jobs, which is the double dip that you really want from economic development. But the interchange is an obstacle to full build out of that intensity of use. It also gave us the opportunity to talk about our shortcomings on the water and wastewater side to serve that intensity of use. So that'll be at the very least, when we have our water infrastructure conversation that we just talked about for July, we'll probably be introducing some ideas we have to serve that parcel. That we have to think a little beyond what I think is in the current CIP. But for now, I think it's just wanting to communicate to council that the region really is looking closely at that and finding ways to support that development to meet the statewide targets. And as you know, from the national standpoint, federal dollars fed this state semiconductor. There's a national, bills passed to bring semiconductor industry back, domestically, from a multiple national strategic standpoint. So it really highlights it. There'll be a lot of action, I think, coming from that, at least speculative action and a little bit of infrastructure progress. And where it goes after that, you never know in economic development. So more to come, and we'll keep it incrementally coming to council so you stay abreast of it. Tiny item on the water loan monitoring. That's again related to the water projects and our CIP for water. Just a quick update from Business Oregon that they just completed a review. It was something that I think it happened kind of concurrently to us instigating, where are we on our loan and our city match and all that stuff. It was an opportune time for them to kind of do a compliance review. And we got a letter that's in the packet that shows that we're in great shape with how we've, from the get-go, have dealt with that loan and that funding source. So we're in great shape. We may need to or want to request an extension on that to be able to spend the full loan allotment. The due date currently is the end of December of this year. It is highly unlikely we would be able to spend it by then. We have projects that easily will use up those funds, but just not be able to get it in the ground and completed before. And that really is the completion of well 3 and the transmission line treatment. So we've done the well. We've got the pipe in the ground, we've got production, but we now are doing the well house and the treatment equipment that needs to treat the water, the SCADA equipment that runs and controls it, and the house that it literally the structure that it goes in. And then the large project that's remaining is a transmission line to get that into our system. And that goes, that's on Stallings and Coburg. So Coburg North, no, not North Coburg, Coburg Road involves a lot of county rights of way and all of that. So not a challenging engineering project, just a timing one for getting all the county permits and approvals that go along with their rights of way. But again, more to come on the details of that coming up in the future. And I think I noted, yeah, in July.
We did finally get the wetlands permit all going through, so
Oh.
we can start getting.
Yes.
Getting water to Premier RV by July 1st.
Yeah, I skipped the second half of that with I was talking about the grant and forgot to add that I added that. Yeah, that's good news. We purchased the credits and we were fearful that the amount that council approved from our prior meeting in December, we were fearful that wasn't gonna be enough because they added some acreage that we had to buy credits for. But we were able to, by having to buy a larger chunk, the price came down per. So we ended up right at the amount that we talked about, right in the $32,000 to $33,000 of credits. Compared that with a couple other private developers recently, and we got a good price. City of Eugene was who we bought the credits from. So that's good news. And then, as the mayor said, we're on target. We can't do any work in there until June 1st. So we're looking at the first week or two in June to be in there and extending the water line over and having Premier all connected by July 1st. And they are very happy with that.
That has been a long process. And so that's great news.
I've heard about that one literally on day one when I got here.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a hot topic right on day one. Yeah.
It's been a
And
long-
that permit also allows the 300 feet or so of extension of water line to connect to the 107 acres. As we'll get into later, that may not be an adequate supply, but it at least is the infrastructure that connects them. And that permit covers both. Engineering services, we've talked about this one several times. We have the RFP ready to go. We have one. It requires we're including an attached draft contract, just a template, not filled in. And we're updating that and wanted to update that with some of the current public contracting stuff. So that will pop in there and we'll get that out probably by the end of this week or start of next. It'll be out for about 3 weeks and then we'll have a small committee to review. Anticipating, I'm not sure if we've talked about it, but three of us on staff, mayor, and if we want, if there's interest, a counselor, because I think it's it's it is our largest professional services contract. I think it would make sense to go through the scoring, to have a counselor on the committee as well, review the applications, go through the scoring process, and then a recommendation forms to come to council.
So how does this dovetail with the conversation we had 5 or 6 months ago when we got an increase of almost 40% fees from branch engineering? We discussed about diversifying our RFPs or engineering services with other service providers for that.
Yeah, that's exactly what this is. So this gives us, so the way it's put together is we could select someone who really is more of a just, does the city engineer work, and we collectively work with that person or small firm to then do the bids to have design work done by contractors based on the type, water, streets, and not have a one vendor, one contract to do all. And we kind of have that going right now. We're doing Kennedy Jenks for wastewater. We have Consor, a subcontractor right now of Branch, but Consor doing two different things in our water system, the water capacity analysis, and they are designing and doing the treatment part that I just mentioned for well 3. So we do have a diversified group, but yeah, Councilor Lehman, that's exactly right. We'll be able to look at, comparing what current rates are.
They will be considered our agency of record for engineering.
Yeah, we have to have an engineer of record. We have to have somebody with a PE, that is a licensed engineer. So we
But it
need
is
those
going out
services.
for bid. That's
Right.
what this is.
Right.
We are putting out that RFP for bid. It may come back to Branch. There may be another company that we select. It depends on who applies and what we decide.
But again, even though we have one of record, we can choose other services from.
Right. Yeah. We administratively could do that. And the way we word that contract, would be that they're not an exclusive to that. I think there's value in that model. There's some different kind of workload, behind the scenes, administrative workload issues, not insurmountable at all. I think that's wide open still. And it partly will honestly be on what we get back, what we see in the marketplace. As are people interested in that? It's a smaller contract to do that. I think there may be we may only get bidders who say it's only worth it to us if we do, if we are more of the whole shebang.
Did we get any feedback from them when, it was just as we were preparing our budget last year, that we got this 40% increase? Did we get any feedback from them in terms of such a large increase just before budget time?
I've talked a lot with them. So yeah, and I think there's some lessons learned on their side. What they had done with every other client, and you can, look at the other municipal clients, at least, it's all public record. You can look it up. They did regular rate increases, just like we do with utilities and other things. And in Coburg, they didn't. And I think one of their lessons learned, I've heard from both the primary partners in the firm, is that they shouldn't have done that. I think I don't, it's speculative on my part. It was literally my first meeting, and it was when we were both Ann and I both here. It may have been, to me, it wasn't much. I mean, the rates are very normal rates. The new rates, the 40% increase, very normal rates. Timing, I think, was obviously not well done. I don't know precursor about how much discussion was had internally before they submitted all that stuff. So all that stuff, thankfully, I really didn't get into. But what resulted in what we've done from then on, I think has worked really well. And I do know that those rates are not. I know that the increase was a challenge to work into the budget at the end of the, right at the ninth inning. But the total is pretty solid in the market. And I would expect when we get the bids back, we will see what we're paying currently to Branch is very competitive. And that's the beauty of going out. That's why you go out every, 5-ish years, is conditions in the marketplace can change, and you want to make sure that you're able to kind of get that apples to apples and see what those rates are. But yeah, I think they had some, and it probably wasn't communicated well on their part. And it was last second, and nothing works well last second. It never feels good on the decision maker side.
We've done several things, though, over the last several months since that occurred. I think we've established a clarity of expectations and communications that was simply not there before. We have established, and this is kudos to staff, we have established a project management or a project list and a completion follow-up that simply was not in place before. So I think we were taken aback. We were simply all taken aback. But I again, to echo Adam, I don't think the increase was incorrect. I think it was the timing and the lack of communication, which was very clearly articulated and discussed both Anne started that conversation and Adam has continued that on. So I think we're in good shape. I'm glad we're going out for an RFP. But we'll see where that goes.
Just a quick one. I got this, and you all may be on the same email list. Lane Transit District put out a call for potential community members to be on the strategic planning committee. It's, when we had a meeting with the executive director, they talked a lot about kind of doing, scoping and strategy work for what they wanted to do into the future and how they serve the region. And he mentioned several times the value, at least that what they're using this committee for. So I don't know necessarily if it's council or if we, recruit up a planning commissioner to put on another hat and be on a committee, or if it's just a community member. I just thought it would be good to get a little exposure to that. I think it can't hurt to have some a Coburg voice on that group. And I think the links and stuff are on the one pager there. And then the last one, last highlighted item is a summary of the bills. That's coming from the League of Oregon Cities. So it's may or may not have the same kind of context and tone that Representative Conrad had. I thought his was great content. I was really glad to hear all that. But the summary of bills is for all those that passed and that failed. There's little notations by whether the League of Oregon Cities was a proponent or opponent, whether they liked or didn't like the bills that were moving forward. But just general information. And a number of them, staff is doing some additional work to see if they affect us. If so, to what extent. Some do, some don't. Most don't, but some do, and we want to be abreast of all of that. And then a new item that I added, and I'll build this out better. This isn't complete. This current projects and contracts. The contracts part is in response to the point Councilor Lehman made. And I think it's great that we'll list just as contracts are approved. They'll just show up here. It prompts then any discussion we want to have, and then any follow up for actual contract documents and language. Like I said, the projects are that's the current stuff. I could probably at this point, we're on the verge of adding Pavilion Park. I could go through and add probably a few more. I'm probably thinking of these not just CIP, but anything of kind of significance that we have booster pumps at the water tanks. Those they didn't make a CIP list because they weren't in the master plan, but they're substantial enough. So this won't be an exact copy of the CIP, but it'll have all of the CIP that we have currently going and a few other relevant bigger projects. And some of them could fall into seal coat and crack seal. That's not a capital project, but it's substantial enough to, I think, make it on this list. So, and we're still working on changing some of our departmental reports to a little more graphic displays, and we'll just keep poking away at that.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah, kept going.
Lot going on. I wonder if anyone on our transportation committee would be interested in maybe working on the Lane County
I will.
Transit District.
I'll put that little one pager in that agenda. That's a great idea. Which that group, just for council update, just finished the third meeting. We have the fourth meeting coming here later this month. And from the staff perspective, it's been a great group, really good information and feedback and very open. And you know, in alignment on many things, you know, when the focus is pedestrian safety, it's pretty easy to be in good alignment. But also some differences about, you know, how they perceive different things in way of speed limits and traffic controls and that kind of stuff. So it's been really good. I think it's a productive use of all of our time, and that we're still on track to have a formal recommendation from that body to you all at the very latest August, but probably July. They'll wrap up their meetings in end of June. So we may not make it to get a recommendation in for the July meeting. Well, and we don't have an August meeting. So September for sure. You'll receive it in September.
Just another workload for Sammy. On the future meetings, can we also put the times on these? It's be helpful for me. I know I've been late to a couple of meetings because I thought our one meeting was at 4:30 and it was at 4, so would help me out if we could.
Just the list.
Future meetings there.
Just
Rather than just the date, but putting the time.
Yeah.
date and
also.
time. If we know them, or we'll put TBA if we don't, because some of the ad hocs, maybe we try to stay a little more flexible, but yeah, it makes sense. Because that one, yep, I know what happened. That was a bummer. We will do that.
I got it.
And the planning commission meeting is at
Yeah.
6.
Mostly they.
And next week I'll be staffing that one. It'll be it's a one item meeting, and then they'll resume their comp plan stuff the following. I won't pretend to present on the comp plan elements, but
Then we have the Finance Audit Committee report to council.
yeah, that one was a little dated.
It was in
Yeah.
your red folder packet. I don't know if there's anything from Counselor Wells, you said, right?
That was not.
It was not there. And
Maybe just
are
call
there
out,
any other,
maybe call out those budget committee meetings just as a reminder. Those are May 7th and the 28th. Those are, you know, the 7th will be kind of the presentation overview, budget message, and I
that starts at,
think we'll do those at 6. Right? Or do we do, I don't know. What do we? Okay. Okay.
we'll confirm, and there will
Yep.
be an
send it
invitation will
by
go
email.
Yep.
out.
Yep.
And yeah, you guys have the budget binders or not binders.
Packets. Yep.
And I will not be there at that budget committee meeting, nor will I be at the May 14th city council meeting. I will be out of town on both of those dates. Counselor Engelbrechtson will be chairing the May 14th council meeting. Thank you for that. And the May 7th budget meeting is usually just an introduction to the budget process and to go over the packets.
Yeah, it'll be an
I will
overview.
have that information.
Yep.
Certainly be reviewing that and then be able to participate in the rest of those meetings. So any comments from council, any liaison reports?
I do have one council comment.
Okay.
I don't think it's on our specifically on our work plan, but we have discussed having further conversation about a diesel tax.
Yeah.
Related to our TUF. Just wondering if we have any ideas when we're gonna begin that discussion.
Yeah, you know, as soon as we get budget done, my immediate task after that is to work with staff and do a build out of that framework document. Cause that specific topic to me lies inside of the umbrella of the 10-year revenue forecast. And it goes with the CIP conversation of water and streets that we were talking about. That's, yeah, it's an essential, spoiler alert, that's a key one for being able to fund the street projects, is to find that revenue stream. And yeah, there may be new opportunity to approach that topic and that revenue stream. So I would expect at least a starter kit conversation about that in July, and then having a more well understood kind of schedule of the broader 10-year revenue forecast and plan following that. Because that one will take a while. That's a big one to undertake. But gotta get budget finished first.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that I'm continuing to attend most of the Lane Act meetings, which is Lane Area Committee on Transportation on behalf of Coburg. And tomorrow, I think we are supposed to, it's tomorrow evening is the next meeting. We are supposed to discuss the various regional members' priorities. That's kind of been an ongoing topic, but I believe we're going to be discussing a little bit more tomorrow. And for Coburg, the two priorities that we've really stuck with that committee is, of course, the I-5 interchange and the needs that we would have there, or that the property would have for upgrading that interchange, and also the safety issues with if any pedestrian wants to use it. Right now, it's basically unsafe. And then the second one would be our longer range look at transportation coming, the commuter traffic and other commercial traffic coming through town from the Harrisburg side and coming through to Eugene, and the fact that we have this bottleneck on Willamette and our need. We do have an upcoming study that's been funded, but it's still a couple years out to study a potential bypass or some other route that could be used. So we don't, not all of the traffic just bottlenecks through that one intersection next to the school and the fire station.
Yeah. So Councilor, maybe add, in case it comes up, useful information for you for the meeting. In the meeting we had Friday, Vidal from, I'm not sure his title at ODOT, the main guy there, and Mark, who's on the regional solutions team representing ODOT, were both in the meeting as well. And really the focus that I think are the search for funds for the next step is predominantly kind of focused on environmental review and right-of-way acquisition. So those are the terms that keep coming up just for back pocket for you.
Okay.
And that's probably in the $3 to $5 million range is what people are kicking around as what's needed to kind of take that next step. And Vidal's take is, if you find me the money, I'll prioritize it. And that's the challenge, with ODOT is not too different than our local CIP conversation is they have more projects than they have money. And Vidal is not the decision maker necessarily for funds coming here. He can influence some. But there's a $7 billion bridge up north. There's when you start talking B's on these ODOT projects, they're substantial. So anyway, I just thought just food for thought in case that gets kicked around. That's what we're hearing as what makes sense, and we may be trying to strategize with ODOT or push ODOT to help us strategize with congressional earmarks as a means to get those funds. Not this round is already done, and we put in for PVE ourselves for this, but we can't put in for the interchange. ODOT has to put in for congressional earmarks for that. So there's kind of some work being done to see how that could work. And again, like it probably will come into some prioritization exercises with these different groups about how that ultimately plays out. So that's just the backstory that I got from Friday.
And in sort of in conjunction with what I have figured out as, there are many different components to our traffic issues. And I sit on the Metropolitan Policy Committee, which is sort of I don't know if I call it, I'm going to call it a parent organization for the Lane Act, but above that is the Metropolitan Policy Organization, which has a smaller core group with that. But at the MPC, we hear a lot that ODOT's funding from the federal government has been slashed, and there haven't been appropriations with our legislature. either for ODOT. But we've also, I mean, I think all of us remember the letter that came back out from ODOT last year that says we're not gonna be able to plow like we have previously. We're not gonna be able to do this. We're going to have to prioritize. And that's because their funding has been shrunk down. And part of that is related to rising costs of everything, and we're all experiencing that. One of the things that did come up at the last MPC meeting, which I think was last week, was, there were representatives from Springfield, and it also impacts us as, as the hospitals have migrated from Eugene to Springfield, people are saying, if the bridges go down, we can't get to a hospital. And I'm going, well, there's been a bunch of us out here for a long time that have been saying that. You can't get there from here if the bridges go down. So there is some conversation and some prioritization as we look at, as Representative Conrad said, is we look at healthcare needs in the region and in the state. One of the things is being able to access facilities. So whether that will come to anything, whether that will change anything, I don't know, but there is certainly being attention given to the bridges, to the overpasses, to, the interchanges, and, they may not be deemed unsafe yet or in comparison to others, but they're certainly approaching. Lots of different issues that are pending there.
Yep.
Anything else for the good of the order? Otherwise, I will adjourn this meeting at, let's see, what is it? 8:50.